Hello everyone, today I will bring a story about Boris. He is the second son of the Lord. It's not about being happy or rich, what you need to do is survive until the world of suffering ends. Life suddenly became brighter when he met his older brother. The two of them always smiled and chirped whenever they were together. Until one day the Lord's younger brother returned. They were more distant than strangers. He found every excuse to get the armor. This treasure is in the hands of Boris's brother. Let's see how the story will end. A group of people are following each other going in the same direction. The girl took the initiative to start a conversation. Hey, you said you're 12 years old, so am I, so who's your younger brother? The boy spoke indifferently. I don't care, you can be my sister if you like. Bored to death, as soon as she finished speaking she turned away. He put his hand on his chin and hesitated. Okay, then let's be the little sister. The girl became panicked. About that, I didn't say I wanted to be a younger sister. The important thing is that from now on we will become each other's family. The two words family made the boy speechless for a few seconds. Now I'm becoming family with strangers, but I also used to live with my family. The male lead's name is Boris Dineman, the second son of the Chevulture Dineman Lord Travier Longut. 12 years ago at the Dineman mansion. Young Master Borit, welcome to the Dineman mansion. It's a pity I'm the only one by your side tonight. Our Dineman family is a prestigious martial arts family. Surely he will grow up to become a brave warrior, then he will inherit the family's heirloom sword and armor. The treasures are called ice swords and snow armor, and he and his brother, young Master Dijal, will use them. The family's matriarch has passed away and the master probably hates all the second children in this world. But young Master Goat Jealous is a kind boy, he will definitely love you. Young Master Boris, you have to live. This country, Travier, sees countless people losing their lives every day because of the uprising. Your uncle has been removed from the family tree. Now he is dreaming of revenge. We could lose our lives at any time because of this uprising. But even if our family falls into a sea of blood or anyone wants to target the family treasure, don't worry, whoever survives will take revenge on our behalf. We are Dineman family. We'll never forget these things. First is friendship. Then there is kindness. Where there is revenge there will be revenge. So young master you must survive. Yes, you must survive. Try to live until this painful world ends. He looked back. The one I choose. Death is not allowed. A heavy rain fell on the Dineman family mansion. The nanny advised to be careful. There is a ghost lurking near Imera Lake. Remember these words of mine, young Master Borit. No matter what happens, you can't go near that lake either. You will be able to see it at night, especially on thunderous nights like today. Its eyes shine in the dark night, waiting to devour those who dare come close. So, you can't go near that Imera Lake. Dijal wondered, did the nanny say that to you? He replied, yes, everyone said that to you. Everyone keeps saying that no matter what happens, you can't go near Imera Lake. And beware of the red-eyed ghost that lives there. I rubbed that innocent face. You don't need to worry about things like that. Goat Jeal's voice is very gentle. Don't worry, Borit. I will always be here for you. His eyesight noticed that today his smile was much brighter, so why did I find it strange? Boris smiled and replied, yes. He ruffled the boy's hair teasingly. Those birds flew away quickly. My little brother's head is not your nest. What bird? The two of them laughed and chirped. A moment later, the jealous goat took a wooden sword and poked him in the stomach. It's time to practice. Boris rushed forward and took it. He used all his strength to strike but he easily dodged. Dijal rubbed his head and instructed, you have to choose the right distance. You swung the sword from too far away. Over a period of time, the practice has improved. He praised, the posture is not too bad. Very good Bohiz. He showed an amused smile. I'm serious now, ready to go. He rushed forward, causing both of them to fall to the ground. Why did you fall backwards? Dijal asked again, who pushed him first? Chokul observed everything through the window. Tuc said in a low voice, it seems like young Master Goat Jealousy is very fond of his younger brother. Young Master Borit also seems to be very attached to him. The expression on his face showed that he was unhappy. The air is so pathetic. Now is not the time to be lazy. Suddenly his expression turned serious. The other two were still enthusiastic about practicing. Let's try again Bohiz. He said yes. He was still insecure about something. A strange feeling still stuck with him. Why? Try holding your sword tightly. Dijal was extremely surprised when the boy improved so quickly. Very good, the attack is much more powerful than before. But the next second he had to remind me, Boris, you're too close. Wait, as soon as he finished speaking, the tip of the sword was right in front of Borit's eyes. Dijal quickly caught the boy. He's sorry, he won't do that again. He fell into a state of confusion. This was the first time. I felt scared as if someone was about to kill me. Just as I fell asleep, someone called out in panic, young Master Goat Jeal, young Master Borit. I'm here, this is very urgent, you two don't go back to the family's territory. He asked confusedly what's going on. That person was breathing heavily while mentioning the name Ladu Dianiman. Having returned, after listening, the two people froze on the spot. His eyes were filled with fear, unfortunately that strange feeling, even though it was something I couldn't control. Sometimes it is activated and becomes an omen. I haven't been gone long and you've already forgotten your old master. The stupid dog, the La Dog, scolded him as soon as he set foot in the door. Chokul is deep in thought. Extremely serious expression. Tuc called out to the homeowner. Should we let him inside? The answer that had to be said was, yes. As soon as the door opened, Ladu walked in. It's been a while, he thought, it's finally time. This person is Chokul's younger brother. It's been 5 years since I banished you. I'm surprised you're still alive, Ladu. What, are you disappointed to see me here, brother? Chokulcher asked himself. Ladu, I don't know why you're here, but why did you come all the way here to die? He glanced sideways and up and down. Nothing had changed here, only the things were older. Please invite us to drink something. We rushed here for half a day to chat with you. A moment later, the tea and water were prepared. The two sat across from each other after not seeing each other for so many years. Ladu took a sip and reviewed the past. Do you remember when we were kids? We had a duel on the lawn rug field. I still remember the sound of swords clashing. Then we will skip practice and go to the grassy hills to play. But he was scolded by his father for not behaving properly like an older brother. Cho Vulture frowned and asked, what do you want? He remained calm. You were so impatient. Okay, then let him get to work. The glass was placed firmly on the table. You know, the Prince Khan who is behind me will be crowned crown prince in this election. At that time, you, the other person on the prince's side, will become a thorn in the crown prince's side. The reason I came back is to protect you and this family. Look away. If you still want to say the wrong thing, then leave the mansion. Ladu asked again, this mansion does not belong only to you. Our parents left it to both of us. He gritted his teeth to suppress his anger. Have you forgotten that this house has already given up on you? Our sister died unjustly because of you. Have you forgotten Dinika? Ladu laughed out loud. He thought carefully. Surely it's my fault. He shouted loudly, if it weren't for your dirty tricks. She is now living with her fiancé. Ladu said in a low voice, back then you told me to do that to Dni, who went crazy and killed her. It's not me, it's you. Cho Vulture held the glass in his hand. He dared. Thinking up that ridiculous excuse in front of me, all the tea was thrown in his face. Even though his father had passed away a long time ago, he was still so bad. Ladu raised his hand to wipe his face and continued, that's it, everyone in Traviachi must be stubborn. This whole family is divided into factions. Living in a family like that, do you think your son will be different from us? Chokul was too much to bear and went out. He pushed the chair out and stood up. Brother, you better remember. This is your last chance, man. Because we are brothers, I came here to forgive your mistakes. The Prince Khan will also turn a blind eye to what you have done. Ladu gave me a devilish smile. All you need to do is give me the Quintbot tomb set. He didn't say much but immediately pulled out his sword and disappeared. Hurry up, even if it costs me my head, I won't give you anything. The smile is still on Ladu's lips. Just as I thought, you're an idiot. Okay, let's see how long you can last. I'll take everything from you. As soon as I heard your name, I was present. Yes sir. He spoke in a low voice and began to prepare to leave. It's time to defend no. Dijal hugged Boris and asked where his father was. The other person quickly said his father was on the second floor. The butler is already downstairs. Yes, he has already arrived at the arena. The door was opened. The young master quickly came. He quickly walked in. It was time to use the Quintbot tot. Boris looked at him without blinking. The Quintetbot Tomat set is a set of armor obtained from killing another country's lord and 99 enemies. A shirt known as snow armor. And the sword won by killing countless enemies for 30 years is the ice sword. A treasure of the Dianiman house that has been passed down through generations, a winter weapon that only the strongest warriors have possessed over the centuries. Those treasures were only rumored, but now they are in the hands of their owners. Literally like a family heirloom. Dajel, I have something to show you, follow me. Chokan is holding a candle in his hand and leading his son somewhere. You've probably heard about it, the family heirloom that my great-grandfather and his son won after defeating countless enemies. Boris stood outside and peeked in. What the father wanted to show his son was the ice sword and the snow armor, both of these treasures combined into a set of quintessences. Is it really in my house? He asked. Even if you feel the same way, it seems like we've been silent all this time and it's a waste of time. Their grandfather had given the two brothers each a part of the holy sword set, but he had made it so that the two only worked properly when they were used together. Dijal looked attentively at his father as he told the story. This year you will be 20 years old, you must learn how to become the heir to the Dineman family. He said with a solemn face, when the family is in danger, you must take this set of quint sheets and escape. With an expression of disbelief on his face, he ran away alone. He continued, no matter what happens, you must live and protect our family's heirloom. If you live, then the family can live. I'm not allowed to let him disappear. Do you understand? Dijil, yes father. Boris stood outside the door and heard the entire conversation. The sword is called the Ice Sword and the armor is the Snow Armor, which is the treasure of the Dianiman family, the Quintbot set. The scene changes to the room. Dijil shows his younger brother Boris two treasures and asks which one do you think looks cooler than Boris. He replied, because the armor is so heavy, the sword is probably cooler. Now I hold the sword and give it to you, so you keep the sword. When you're old enough to hold a sword, I'll give it to you, so you can try it out. There was suddenly a crash on the floor. He was not yet old enough, so the sword was still quite heavy compared to his strength. His brother immediately helped him raise the sword. He gently looked at him and said, the ice sword is Boris. Since then, his brother kept telling him over and over again that it was his ice sword, so he began to think it was his sword. But compared to his brother, he is just a child. He thought, this sword should be his, I can't own it. Returning to the current situation, you have brought troops here, father must have predicted this, we must do as planned. Don't worry, Boris. Previously, Butler Tuc had told him about riots. When riots occurred within the family, there were only winners and losers, there was no right or wrong. This means that even if many people lose their lives, no one will be punished. Young Master Boris, because you are also a member of Trossixchi, you will understand when the time comes. He sat dazed for a moment. Dijil asked him to borrow the ice sword. Seeing that you didn't answer, I was afraid that you wouldn't listen to me asking again. He replied, I don't have to give it back to you, it's my sword. Father gave it to me, not you. He looked at him affectionately and replied, I must be that person, I hope you will cry for me. He stared at him. Put your hand on his shoulder and call his name. Dijil knelt down in front of him and repeated what he often told him, the ice sword is yours. I won't take it away without your permission, and when the riot ends I will return it immediately. Boris replied sadly, but he couldn't even hold the sword. Don't you remember the last time we held swords together? Even though it's heavy compared to you now, don't worry. I can do it, I can hold it because I'm a warrior. Dijil said sweet words from the bottom of his heart to his younger brother. Just like his name, he laid his head on his brother's shoulder. Suddenly there was a noise outside the window. It seemed like a riot had started. Bright light shines through the window. Scene change outside the battlefield. Today the Dianiman family will change ownership. Listen, the head of the Dianiman family is already a different person. Put down your sword and surrender. The enemy army is rushing to their mansion. Serving the new master and reviving the Dineman family, Chokol stood on the mansion and looked down at the soldiers outside. Those who would have been upset by those words had already left. Chokol thought, although it cannot be compared to the golden age when his father was here, we still have Dianiman soldiers who are loyal to the family. Chokol shouted loudly, whoever dares to invade Longut's territory, come out. The enemy pointed his finger at him, and there was Kukul Dineman on the balcony. He immediately replied, are you planning to hide like a coward? I will make this place the brightest tonight. As he said it, there was a magician behind him casting a spell. Tuc pointed his magic formation straight up and activated it, igniting fire. Magical power flooded the enemy battlefield. Those guys were confused and didn't understand that there was something very strange surrounding them, something like fire magic. Kill the traitor Leto. The enemy army was scared and dispersed. They had magicians and ran away quickly. Chuckle shouted, those bastards come here. You think the Dineman family will fall before a bunch of brats? In the middle of speaking, he felt a strange aura. He turned around in panic. A huge giant snake crawled out and destroyed his house. This monster was summoned from the ice world. Its name is Rygo. Trossixchi has about 3 people capable of summoning giant snakes, but you still use despicable tricks. The chief Khan's great magician Dongna is here. I can't believe Khan gave Dongna to Ladu. Ladu's position is being preserved. The servants in the mansion ran away. Everyone quickly left the mansion. As soon as the monster appeared, it destroyed the city wall and the building was collapsing. Evacuating people from the mansion is the top priority. The second team will hold out, so they must escape as quickly as possible to make a plan. Suddenly he heard his son's voice. He shouted loudly for Dijil. He held Boris's hand and told him to run ahead. How are you going to get out of here with a kid? Do you realize what you protect now? Run now. He felt guilty and looked away as if he was about to cry. He ran away without looking back. On one side Boris was grabbed by the hand and pulled in the opposite direction by his father. The servants escorted the two of them somewhere. At this time, Boris repeated what his father said. It would be impossible to escape with a child. After all, he was just a burden to his brother. The father advised, even to the last moment, you still have to live and protect the armor. Mr. Dijil must live and protect the treasure, because even if he lived, he would not be able to protect his family. But it feels strange. Something will happen to your brother. Outside, people were running away screaming behind the giant snake that was still rampaging. Soldiers on both sides began to rush each other. The butler said, it seemed like most people had escaped the mansion. While Tuc was speaking, there was a loud crash behind him. The sound of the mansion collapsing, pieces of debris flying everywhere. Boris was gaping in horror as the place where he had lived for so long was destroyed in the blink of an eye, while his father next to him gritted his teeth in anger. Ladu, that dog, how dare he destroy the mansion? As a member of the Dineman family I will never forgive him. He turned to the butler to see how the first and second teams were doing. Tuc raised his hand in the air. Immediately, a scene of two sides, us and the enemy, appeared. Our troops are at a disadvantage and cannot retreat to the mansion. We will attack both entrances and exits of the mansion, divide the remaining soldiers into two groups, tell them to hide in the bushes and wait for orders. Boris said, but what about the monster? He replied, everything will be fine if we don't go back to the mansion. Stop whining like a child. That monster cannot touch creatures living in this world, half of its body is in another world. He stood looking at the mansion. The mandarins have begun to give orders. As planned, the soldiers were waiting in ambush. Chokul told him to follow slowly and then step back. When the fighting starts, run straight towards the field, you need to run fast, understand? Boris asked him, where are you going? He was silent for a long time. Then say the name, Imare Lake. He was stunned when he heard that. He spoke tremblingly, but the nanny said there was an evil spirit residing there. He immediately shouted at him, do you believe the words of an old maid? How can you call yourself a member of the Dine family? Man, because of that stupid rumor, no one dared to go there, now that's the safest place. Near the lake there were 3 trees with black roots. He told him to hide there and come pick him up after the battle ended. He planned to say something to him. Suddenly there was an order in his ears, the homeowner's time had come. He immediately opened fire, and everyone attacked the east gate. Just like that, the soldiers rushed forward en masse. He was worried about him and told him to quickly run in the direction he pointed earlier. At this moment he suddenly woke up. Get rid of your fear and run straight towards the lake. Dad was right, she must have made that story up, we should run to Lake Imera. The scene at the Dinoman mansion right now is like a chaotic massacre, with soldiers on both sides fighting fiercely. Ladu appears in a manner that smells like a villain. He and the rebels entered the mansion to massacre, now I will kill all of you. Saying that, he smiled crookedly and unsheathed his sword. His sword strokes were as fast as lightning, continuously defeating the soldiers of the mansion. Dark red blood flowed out along the arc of the sword swing and the savage smile of the rebel. Where are you hiding, brother, treating me like a criminal, kicking me out and claiming the patriarch's seat for yourself? But now you're hiding in fear like a bunch of mice. At that moment, someone shouted, he's here, it's the Dinman vulture, he's here. When Ladu heard that, he felt like his stomach was filled with excitement. He headed towards his beloved and loving brother and approached the mansion. The day is not far away when the black sword Hogyun will be replaced by the silver and white sword. The owner of the Dieniman family and a number of close soldiers were now surrounded in the forest by countless rebels. Their loud shouts filled the whole area, pursuing the Dieniman vultures. Man, the temperament of the head of the Dineman family did not allow him to appear obedient to his enemies. While being pushed into a corner, Chokul can still take advantage of anyone who dares to rush forward. How dare you dare to step foot on my land? Then point the blade at those around, whoever is good will rush into this place with so much blood. Come up here and I'll make you pay for your courage to return to the lost box this turn. At this moment, from behind, a sharp blade rushed forward and tore through the night. By the time the Dieniman vulture realized, he had been assassinated by Ladu. I caught you again this afternoon, stay tuned. Ladu swung his sword and blood splashed on the ground in an arc. It's true that the Star Fruit Tree brothers are all worried. How dare you ambush me, Ladu? Ladu is now in the upper hand, so he is also extremely superior. No matter what the Dieniman family is, he no longer has the ability to react as quickly as before. Obviously because you're old. Ladu immediately used a sword without hesitation to finish off his brother. When he died, he still couldn't imagine that he would die in the hands of this beloved younger brother. When Butler Tuc ran to the place, there was no time to prevent the tragedy from happening again. On the contrary, it will make Lado even more crazy. I will send you away with him. Suddenly in the middle of the desolate night, a bright light flashed like lightning hitting the ground, making everyone standing here stunned for a moment. Next, the space was covered by a strange, opaque fog. People in front and behind within 10 steps could not see each other's faces and could not distinguish between enemies and friends. The space gradually became chaotic. What is this mist? I can't see anything. In the gloomy night, a delicate magic talisman glowed. When Ladu realized something was wrong, Butler Tuc promptly helped homeowner Choken and prepared to rely on magic to escape. Lado could not bear to let the prey that was right in front of his eyes slip away, so he pulled out his sword like crazy. Are you planning on running away like a coward? It's too pathetic. Chokul man, but that slash only hit the mist and the two people disappeared without a trace. Ladu reared up like a beast and ordered his subordinates. Damn it, go find him now. On that same terrible night, Boris was following his father's instructions and running towards the forbidden lake, a long and dangerous trail, surrounded by darkness full of uncertainty, but he still left it alone. Running forward, looking for the black tree root as my father told me. After finding it, Boris ran straight to the tree, his chest heaving with breath because he was so exhausted. Dad will come soon, he said so. Boris leaned his back against the tree and slid down. His heart felt like it was about to faint from running a long distance, or maybe because he still couldn't shake the terror after a bloody rain and wind. Everything that happened was beyond imagination for a young master who had never experienced war. He waited quietly, hoping that at some point his father would come and take him home. The wild forest was so terrifyingly quiet that any strange sound could give him a heart attack. Boris put his hand on his chest to try to calm himself and not scream, his mind constantly thinking about legends about an evil demon lurking deep at the bottom of the lake that would kill any traveler. Accidentally entering its territory, is father already here or is a more terrible danger coming? Suddenly that strange sound stopped, returning the space to its original silence. Boris seemed to stop breathing to pay attention to every movement. Has that sound stopped? But at that moment, premonitions of death suddenly overwhelmed the young man's mind, the obsession of something insidious lurking right behind him, just waiting for prey. Discovered that he would be carried to the altar to watch naked chickens for 8 generations. Suddenly, very thin and sharp ropes came out of nowhere and wrapped around Boris's body, then dragged him backwards. By the time he realized the situation, Boris was so scared that his face was bloodless. What had grabbed him were the long tentacles of a giant, extremely hideous monster. This was the evil spirit. Evil at the bottom of the Star Lake. Boris tried to struggle to escape but nothing happened. At this moment he thought to himself that what his nanny said was true, maybe his father didn't know. Is there a monster in the lake? Why is he there? The monster used its tentacles to pull Boris closer, making him extremely scared. No, he didn't want to die. Boris closed his eyes tightly and screamed for help from his father and brother. Right at this moment when he was so close to life and death, there was a sharp slash that cut off the tentacles that were holding Boris. With another decisive sword strike, the monster cried out in pain and then had its head taken off easily. Boris fell to the ground in pain. The monster's black blood was still splashed on his face. Boris's face turned pale in fear. He quickly got up and looked at the swordsman who had saved him. He retracted the blade and approached him. The moonlight is both gentle and magical, illuminating that person's face. Boris, why are you here? Boris stood there in surprise for a long time. Until I realized it, I was already in Dijel's heart. Perhaps because he had just crawled out of the demon gate, Boris was still stiff, unable to believe that the danger had passed. Dijel hugged him tightly and said, I almost lost my life. Boris only now regained his composure. He hugged his brother tightly and couldn't hold back his tears. His father told him to wait here. Dijel grabbed his shoulder worriedly. Dad left me alone here. Why did you come here? Father said I had to protect my snow armor and ice sword. Dijel was silent for a long time. Wiping away the blood on Boris's cheek, he immediately spoke. He didn't think like his father. To him family was more important than treasure. If we all die, what use is the treasure? We can't protect it forever. How can anyone outlive it? Having said that, Dijel helped Boris stand up. He asked him how he knew he was here. He immediately smiled more tenderly than the bright moonlight above. Because he is your brother, no matter where you are, I will protect you. If they weren't brothers, maybe readers would be right now. Invited each other to get on the boat and row this couple to death. Boris looked confused at his brother, until suddenly there was a bright light right behind them. What was that light just now? Dijel grabbed Boris's shoulder tightly and said, listen carefully, Boris. You are not the only enemy. Crown Prince Khan has joined hands with you. He's the one who lent me soldiers and magicians. Khan, he wants the snow armor and ice sword as well as the support and loyalty of the Dianiman family. To achieve that goal, they had to eliminate my father. Dad already knows everything. That's why we let us hide first. While the two of them were talking, a space-time vortex opened before our eyes. Dijel and Boris were stunned in recognition. The people who came out of that gate were his father and butler Tuc. When Dijel saw the Che vulture's body covered in blood, he panicked and said, Dad, what happened? The butler helped his master and said, Hagyun. The Haguani that Chief Khan possesses is a very strong toxin that can resist all treatments. My healing magic has no effect. But why are you still here, young Master Dijel? Dijel was confused and didn't know how to explain. The butler breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay, are you two okay? Dijil immediately told me about the strange light that flashed and then disappeared on the horizon in the distance, and he thought it came from the mansion. When the butler heard this, his face suddenly became serious. Surely one of Qiare's eyes has been activated. This is the spell that allows people to see very far away. With that spell, great magician Dong Na only needed half a day to find the needle in the pile of straw. Because he said he saw a flash of light, perhaps his location was revealed. Dijil worriedly asked, what should we do now? The housekeeper immediately said, we can only rely on luck. At this time, Chokul weakly spoke up and told Dijil to go. Regardless, he was still so injured he couldn't even stand up. The butler seemed to understand what his master meant, so he also told Dijil to quickly leave this place. Dijil was still hesitant because he was worried about his little brother hiding behind him. The butler emphasized that if you understand what your father means, protect this family heirloom and family. When Dijil's position was revealed and the rebels rushed to kill him, Leto led a group of soldiers on horseback galloping towards Lake Imera. These brats are fearless and fearless. How dare they come to Imera Lake? Because Imera Lake is a forbidden area and also an ancient fear of the people of Longout. And that same terrible place. It took it away. My only sister. Ladu gradually recalls his childhood memories. At that time they played together very happily together. Guess who this is? Den Nika happily called his second brother. All three cousins played on the green grass, creating a very peaceful scene. The only person Leto cares about in the Ditman family is none other than her little sister Denica. The two of them found her curled up sleeping soundly in the closet. Cho Vulture breathed a sigh of relief when he found her, and Ladu smiled happily as he looked at his adorable younger brother. Even when Chokel and Ladu had quarrels or quarreled with each other and Denica saw it, she was always the one to reconcile, forcing the two of them to make up. Denica was the only one who treated the two of them fairly, yet she left like that. She was going to keep going. Continue like this? You nightmare. Everything gradually happened when the three of them grew up. Ladu shouted loudly in question, how could you bring Den and I to a family like that? Cho Vulture gloomily replied, maybe he on the other side, but that was Den and I's choice and now there's nothing we can do about it. Besides blessing her, Ladu couldn't accept that things were going like this. He angrily gritted his teeth and silently came up with a plan. He turned to Denica and said, I think your fiancé is going to Imera Lake. Hearing that, her face darkened because she realized how dangerous that lake was. Denica eagerly ran to find her fiancé. He couldn't go there. Ladu coldly watched. He thought to himself that his plan had succeeded. The reason why Ladu wanted Denica to go to that lake. That's because as soon as she arrived, he would be kidnapped by his subordinates there. He meticulously planned it like this just because he didn't want Denica to go away. That was what was in the plan, but an incident happened that caused things to gradually go out of control. Denica was transformed into a monster by the evil spirit in the lake. Ladu stood dumbfounded looking at the scene before his eyes. His face showed disbelief. Den and I why? Ladu was secretly shocked. She should have been kidnapped by her waiting subordinate and couldn't go near that lake. Chokul pushed Ladu aside. He quickly walked closer to examine the situation. He worriedly said, we have to call a doctor. After reviewing, Cho Vulture said gloomily, she no longer belongs to this world. He turned his head and looked at him with a look full of hatred. Even if you don't agree with her marriage, you can't do that. Leto's face was drenched in sweat. He quickly explained, I didn't think things would turn out like this. He shouted loudly with regret. I never thought that the cowardly Denny would dare to go there. How did I know that evil spirits were real? Chokul turned away in disappointment. Those excuses have no value to me. He coldly gave me the decision. You are no longer a member of the Dineman family. Having said that, Chokul shouted loudly for everyone to go back to the territory. Hearing that made Lalo excitedly shout and ask, what are you going to do? He became more and more panicked when he saw Chokul gradually pull out the sword. He helplessly screamed, no, I can fix it. Faced with that screaming, Chokul still coldly made a decision. The madness caused by evil spirits can only be cured by death, Ladu. He decisively approached the transformed Denica. The expression on Leto's face clearly showed despair. He helplessly screamed miserably. But it will happen. The sharp sword slash will be slashed, accompanied by a streak of crimson blood splashing out. Returning to reality, Ladu shouted loudly for his subordinates to carefully search for things in Imera Lake. The soldiers immediately followed orders and searched. The strange sound suddenly rang out, causing the soldiers to startle and panic. Something slowly crawled closer to them. Those were monsters inside the lake. They screamed very shrill screams. As soon as they saw it, the soldiers panicked and ran away. The scene became more panic than ever. Ladu shouted angrily, you pathetic bastards, how dare you disobey my orders? He had to slash these monsters himself. Ladu looked at the monsters that continuously emerged. I could smell the disgusting scent coming from that Imera Lake. He silently pondered. It would be a lie if he said he wasn't afraid, but If I can defeat Chokul, then tell them all to come here, I will defeat all those disgusting evil spirits. On the other hand, on Dajel's side, Tuc continuously urged him to go into the magic circle to escape, but he seemed to be hesitant to leave. Seeing that, he gently said, if you understand your father's wish, it is to protect the clan and the family heirloom. Speaking of this, Tuc realized that they were very close, but the expression on his face was extremely gloomy. We will soon be discovered. Dajel's face showed seriousness and said, I won't go anywhere and scream, I will stay here to protect my father and younger brother. Tuc calmly said, Ladu is approaching, we will soon experience the worst moments. Hearing that, he tightened his grip on the sword in his hand and asked in return, aren't family heirlooms protected to be used at the worst moment? Dajel continued with a serious face, if you have what you want. Well, I also got what I wanted. Hearing what he said made Chokul angrily glared at me. I suddenly called Boris, you understand right? The boy hesitated, not knowing how to answer. Borit gradually remembered the scene he saw before. The boy stood in a corner listening to what they said, his eyes sparkled with disappointment. I also hate Chokul. But I have no intention of surviving alone without my brother or father. Dajel smiled and told Boris that it would be glorious for them to choose death. Hearing what he said made the boy shocked. Tuc suddenly spoke up and said that he would start first. He gradually lifted up Chokul and then told him, until you see me dead, don't go out. Dajel continued firmly, when it's my turn to face him, I will not falter. Boris looked at his brother and silently realized. Why are his eyes always blue and his smile always bright? There is always a strange premonition. The four of them gradually stood up and continued to the calm lake surface. Don't say okay again, it's finally here. He sighed tiredly. Then I wonder, surely I am somewhere in the lake, right? Captured by an evil spirit, I will never be able to escape. Chokul looked at the turbulent water on the lake. He sadly called his sister's name, Denanai. A sarcastic voice rang out, causing Chokul to turn around and look. Now he was looking for Denanai. After leaving her without a grave, the one speaking was Ladu. He arrogantly walked forward with the magician Dongna. He continued to sarcasm, the girl must be very happy when she saw him, because in the end her brother stabbed her to death here. Cho Vulture glared and told Ladu that he would never realize his wrong actions. He gradually pulled out his sword and then smiled evilly and asked back, and you are just now coming to ask for forgiveness? Chokul suddenly rushed forward, we were both too late for that. He smiled happily and said, okay, let's settle this long-standing grudge, until the red-eyed evil spirit appeared. Seeing him still ignorant like this made Chokulu disappointed. He rushed to attack and shouted loudly, I saved your life, you still haven't realized your mistake. Star. He used his poisonous tongue to turn Denanai into an unjustly dead corpse, while Tuc was using his magic to stop the monsters. The magician Dongna used his fire to burn the monsters. Chokul's curse still echoed in their ears. He said that Ladu was like the monsters in that lake. Hearing that made him angry and shouted, can you still blame me? Wait, Vulture had difficulty blocking the attacks. Ladu shouted angrily, the one who killed Denanai was you, not me. As he spoke, he remembered the image of his younger sister. Cho Vulture glared and said, let's end this here, until the red-eyed evil spirit appears. Having said that, he strongly used his sword to attack Ladu's body. On the other hand, on the side of the two Borist brothers, they are surrounded by monsters on all sides. Dajel whispered to Boris, right here the red-eyed evil spirit killed her. If they appear, I will be able to protect you with ice swordsmanship and snow armor, or I will have to protect you. Hearing him mention evil spirits made the boy feel confused and turned to ask, a spirit, isn't what you killed in the forest an evil spirit? Borit was surprised to see Dajel's scared, sweaty face. Standing in front of a group of scary monsters made him tremble in fear. Seeing his brother like that, the boy bowed his head and thought. Dad was right. Borit gradually remembered his father's words to Dajel. The Katabatioam set was only strong when used by one person. You must survive alone and protect the family heirloom. Dajel's expression turned unbelievable when he heard him say that. After thinking about it, the boy silently decided that he could block the first blow. If the evil spirit appeared, he would block it. The reason Borit made such a decision was because he wanted his brother to be angry. Survive. A ray of light gradually flashed, it became brighter and brighter on Dajel's body, that was a sign of snow armor. He raised his eyes and realized, there it was. Suddenly a red light flashed. The space around Boris suddenly turned white and nothing existed anymore. The boy was stunned when faced with this strange phenomenon. Borit panicked and didn't understand what was going on. He quickly called Dajel but did not receive any response. The space was gradually dyed red. Immediately after that, ghostly laughter rang out continuously, making Borit extremely scared. A creepy voice rang in the boy's ears, what a gorgeous child. Bloodshot eyes appeared, he stared at Borit looking very creepy. The boy opened his eyes startled. Boris jumped up and sat up. Before the boy's eyes was a peaceful scene between the mountains, accompanied by cool breezes. Boris was very surprised when looking at the scene before him. This is somewhere. A sudden voice rang out, causing the boy to look after him. Djel suddenly appeared, waving to Boris. Djel smiled and gently asked, "Are you awake? Drink some water, I just found it nearby." Boris was stunned when he saw his brother talking. Seeing that the boy didn't say anything, Djel was a little confused, so he asked, "What's going on? Why is your face like that? Are you having a nightmare?" After calming down everything, Boris suddenly rushed forward and hugged Djel. The boy's tears gradually flowed and he called out to him. Djel smiled gently and replied, "Yes, this is my brother." He gently hugged the boy into his arms. Boris gradually pondered, but there was something strange. It was definitely at Imera Lake. The boy gradually remembered that his father and uncle were fighting. While the boy's memories gradually faded. What happened next? Boris's face was full of thought. Djel spilled some water, so he stood up and wanted to get some water again. As soon as he stood up, the boy suddenly asked, "What is this place?" Djel smiled and replied, "This is the north of Longvet, the Hatta Plateau in the territory of the Rulung clan. We rode here on horseback." He said he let Boris sleep so well that he didn't know everything. The boy worriedly asked, "What about Dad? Where is Dad?" Djel's face had a fleeting sadness, saying, "Father had gone to another place." He smiled and said, "Things got complicated so everyone dispersed." Hearing that, Boris eagerly asked, "So how should we find Father now?" Djel calmly told the boy not to worry, because Butler Tuc will soon contact them with magic, he said and gently patted Boris's head. The boy was still worried and asked, "So what should we do now?" He pondered and replied, "Let's see if we should meet Aunt. Her side has no enmity with our father. Or we can go in the direction of the elect Koswaye, whom you serve." Boris continued silently, "Can't we all go? Instead of asking for help from strangers, we can live like civilians." Hearing that, Djel smiled and said, "But I don't know what it's like to live like a commoner. We've been served since we were children. This year hasn't been good, so the public doesn't have much sympathy for the nobles." The boy seriously pondered his thoughts, because Father will contact us soon, so until then let's live quietly. While speaking, Boris's stomach suddenly growled, interrupting this gloomy atmosphere. Seeing that, Djel smiled and suggested, "Let's go to the nearby village to eat something." Having said that, the two of them went to a pub that looked quite crowded. The hostess invited the guest in but stopped when she saw the guest in front of her. Djel hesitantly asked, "Give me a room." She evaluated the two people from top to bottom and then smiled and happily announced the price, 10 euros. Hearing this price made Djel pause for a moment. He gently placed the gold coins on the table. The shop owner laughed happily. He seemed like a rich young man. "Why would a young man bring so much money? What is this? Give me one piece of gold." Two men at a nearby table were laughing and talking to each other. They wanted to see what civilians looked like so much. The shop owner took out the key and asked the two what they wanted to eat tomorrow. Djel didn't have to choose anything, so he told her, "Anything is fine." Hearing that, she sarcastically asked them, "Is anything fine? I thought nobles didn't eat normal food." The words from the innkeeper made Boris turn around in shock and look back. Seeing that, Djel quickly pulled the boy away. The two of them gradually walked to the table waiting for food. The people around them started whispering to each other. They even said insulting words to the two brothers. "Why don't you go eat baby food? It looks like you just if you know how to walk. Why don't you two go home and find something to your taste?" They looked at the two of them with eyes full of malice. The man brought the food with a condescending attitude. He slammed the bowl of food down to shame the two brothers. Before leaving, he lingered and said, after eating, "Tell me how you feel, young master." Golden Bohist covered his mouth. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. It was a bowl of food filled with fat worms crawling on top. As soon as he saw this bowl of food, Boris's face turned pale with fright. The boy was so scared that he fell to the ground. Seeing this made the man excitedly urge, "What's wrong? Hurry up and eat. Don't you want to try this in specialty?" Another person mocked with amusement, "It seems like this young master has never tried this dish." When, having gained momentum, he suddenly stood up and said, "Maybe he doesn't know how to eat, let me teach him." The man approached Djel and said, "Go ahead." He coldly shook his hand away and said, "Be taught." Djel glared and said, "I want you guys to eat it right before my eyes." Hearing what he said made the men snort in contempt. He turned around and laughed, "Oh my God, did you hear anything? He wanted me to try it first. What should I do? I don't think I'm hungry enough to eat someone else's food." Before he could finish his sentence, Djel's hand suddenly rushed forward. He pressed his head firmly on the table. The people around were surprised by Djel's sudden action. He said in a strong voice, "It's a specialty, don't be shy, I invite you to eat with me." The man struggled angrily, but Dajjal didn't pay much attention. He gently scooped up a spoonful of greasy worms, seeing that made his face darken in fear. Are you really going to force me to eat it? The man kept apologizing but did not receive a response from him. Borat called in panic but he did not get a response. Seeing him like that, the boy shouted loudly, calling the worm's name. Borat breathed tiredly after shouting loudly. Dajjal gradually stopped his actions, thinking he heard the boy calling. His hand gradually let go of him. You should feel grateful. Dajjal gently dropped the spoon in his hand. He said gloomily, I'm not that strong. Forcing someone to eat a spoonful of insects. He turned and said, we will eat later, let's go Boris. The man raised his head and looked at Dajjal with eyes full of hatred. Seeing that the two wanted to leave, the remaining men shouted angrily, wanting to rush to attack the two. Dajjal frowned and looked at the oncoming crowd. He directly hit a guy in the head, causing him to fly away. That guy angrily covered his face and cursed, you bastard, I will definitely teach you a lesson. Dajjal held the sword loosely in his hand. He pondered whether he should pull out the sword or not, but then he gradually thought about the future consequences so he decided not to do so. Thinking so, Dajjal quickly grabbed a nearby chair, then threw it hard into the crowd. Angry man screaming. The crowd rushed into the place where Dajjal was standing at the same time. Their numbers were so large that he had to struggle to fight back. Dajjal's eyes widened in anger when he heard Boris's scream. They took Boris as a hostage. The man smiled smugly as he firmly grasped the boy's head, ordering him to capture him too. Because they had Boris in their hands, Dajjal had no choice but to be tied up by them. The man happily sarcastically said, you should have been obedient from the beginning, right? Dajjal looked angrily at them, the cowards. He smiled and walked over, still holding the bowl of food from earlier. He didn't expect that you would cause trouble after such a treat. It seems like I have to reteach you table manners. The man walked towards Boris and called out to the boy. He smiled strangely and said, let me take this opportunity to show you some shortcuts. Let me teach you personally. Another person held the boy tightly so that the man could easily put a spoonful of fatty worms into Boris's mouth. Dajjal angrily shouted, stop, what are you doing to a kid? Hearing that, the man turned around excitedly. He made a suggestion, do you want to eat for the boy? As soon as he heard the proposal, Dajjal immediately replied without hesitation, okay, give it to me. Hearing that, they laughed loudly with joy and continued to laugh with each other. The man approached him and said, if you want it, I can't help it. He smiled smugly and tried a piece. Before putting it into Dajjal's mouth, he threatened to say, if you let it out, your brother will have to eat it all. Dajjal gradually opened his mouth, then directly eat a spoonful of wiggling worms. Seeing this scene gave the man goosebumps in surprise. The people around him reacted no differently than him. Boris's face darkened as he worriedly called out to him. Dajjal swallowed the food whole into his mouth. Then suddenly a voice said, my name is Dajjal Ditman, the eldest son of Chokel Dt Man, the long-vested lord. His face darkened when he heard the name that Dajjal mentioned. He solemnly declared, I want to duel with you. In the situation at that time, everyone had two words of doubt in their minds about the identity of Dajjal, the son of Lord Longut. Wait, so he is really a young master, big trouble already. He immediately shouted and said his name. His mood suddenly became worried and he said, Gi. And then he coldly affirmed, of course I will kill you now, but I will give you a chance to redeem yourself. In the duel, admit defeat and face the ground, only then will I forgive you. In return, I will swear on your honor that I will make you eat that entire bowl. Boris felt very surprised when he witnessed this incident. He silently said, although I have seen him holding a sword, I have never seen him in a duel. You look like a different person. At the same time he asked him, take out your sword. He hesitated and thought, damn, he's not really going to kill me, right? Suddenly there was a bright light emitted. That light unexpectedly came from Dajjal's sword. What kind of sword was that? I've heard it before. Is there a sword of winter in this world? Gi couldn't stop trembling in fear. Damn, I didn't expect the rumors to be true. If I fought head to head it would be too risky thinking about it. I had to attack first. He immediately rushed to attack. He immediately fended it off with his sword. His fear gradually reached its peak when he witnessed his strength. Why was he so strong? Dajjal's eyes radiated a bone-chilling coldness. A few seconds later, he knocked him out. Even though he was helpless and prepared to attack, he still felt like he had lost his soul. Seizing a good opportunity, he slashed him with a powerful blow. It was so strong that even his sword must have broken in half. At this moment, he seemed dumbfounded and speechless. Everyone around started to talk. What just happened? How did he cut off Gi's sword? He sat down on the ground in fear. It was impossible. But I didn't expect that Dajjal would bluntly kill him. But before begging, he stopped. He asked, have you admitted defeat yet? He shouted loudly, of course, I was completely convinced. And then he immediately asked, so do it. Eat it. I won't say it twice. He slowly scooped up a spoonful of insect food. then put it straight into your mouth. Its disgust made him moan continuously. Just a few minutes later, Ji seemed to eat the entire bowl. He seemed very disappointed after eating them all. Suddenly he called Boris, and asked you to leave. Change the scene to another place. Inside the room of the two of them, he suddenly called out, "Hey." He immediately turned back with a questioning look on his face. "Why?" "I'm having a confession." He gently moved closer, but told me. He finally said it, "I'm happy that you're okay, I'm also happy that you beat him. But at that time I thought, that you were different. It's not that what you did was wrong. I also know there is no other way. If Dad were here he would probably praise you even so. However, Dijal rejected it. Nowhere is what you see true, no one understands you like me. Boris, I now realize that what my father said was not wrong. I will say it for my father, you must not be soft-hearted. If I could take care of you for the rest of my life, I'm sure you would live an honest life, but I can't be with you forever. You have to have your own path, Boris. And you have to find that path yourself. You have to be stronger, I mean you have to be strict with yourself. If you can't be a rock, then live like a clam, be very discreet so others can't see through you. Dijal urged Boris, you must understand quickly. This world will not leave you alone. So he said, so have you decided to become a clam? He coldly admitted it. Seeing that, he replied, I understand. In his heart, he thought that maybe he said that because he was afraid that he might become weak, because now there are only 2 brothers left, and my father and army are not here. Because it's late, I suggest, go to sleep, don't take off your armor, I don't know who will sneak in. Let me watch over you before you sleep. I'll wake you up at midnight, good night. Even so, he still couldn't sleep. Boris quietly looked at his brother's figure. It's not midnight yet, but he suddenly woke up. When I see tears. He was extremely shocked. Unexpectedly, the tough brother would shed tears. So he woke up, am I dreaming? He is crying. Should I comfort him or not? But I don't dare say. And then Boris pretended not to see anything and went back to lie down. Seeing this made him tear up, because he said he wanted to become a clam. Scene changed to the next morning. The 2 of them were on their way out. Boris sat on horseback with a dull look on his face. Then I suddenly remembered that last night, I had never seen that face of his, so I just said something. Dijal, what is the name of that flower? He replied, cornflowers. So in the past he would tell me stories about flowers. Have you forgotten the stories about flowers, I guess? Night gradually falls, but they still haven't reached the town. It seems we have to sleep outside tonight. 2 cousins built a campfire together. Borit kept holding the sword on one side. Suddenly Dijal called him. And request, take up the sword. You followed us all the way here, yet you still choose to hide like a coward. With so many people around you, I don't see any reason to hide. Finally he appeared and smiled and said, oh my God, look at that arrogant brat. At the same time, he ordered his subordinates to surround them. Faced with the overwhelming number of enemy troops, Boris showed an extremely worried attitude. They were so cunning that they cut the ropes and let their horses run away. Dijal spoke up, you have many subordinates protecting you, Gi. Hearing the mention of him, he instantly trembled with fear. Another guy stood up and said, do you think I came to help him? You still don't understand the situation, right? That sword is the ice sword your family has always been hiding, right? Hearing that, Dijal thought to himself that it was inevitable that a duel could be avoided. I am Dijal Dineman, eldest son of Chokal Dineman, Lord of Longut. I must have made a mistake in naming myself. The crowd proudly ordered, why are you still standing there taking his sword? They rushed forward. Faced with overwhelming numbers, he was still not afraid, but still calmly fought against them. However, facing this number makes him have a bit of difficulty. This is not the sword that you guys are. No matter what you touch, just one swipe can make them fly away. Seeing his strength, one person immediately exclaimed, not bad. Let's see if you can block this attack. Dijal immediately took a defensive position. Suddenly, Borit's voice rang out to warn him, Dijal be careful. From behind a chain was thrown towards him. It simultaneously wrapped around the sword. The old man proudly said, your kid was quite good but it's over now. In this condition, you cannot use any force. However, Dijal did not back down at all. The ice sword now broke through in its power, destroying even his chain. At the light from the sword, everyone was stunned. What was that? The iron chain exploded? Their big brother had a look of joy on his face. It was truly an honor to witness something I had only heard about in rumors. The legendary power that freezes any metal it touches and leaves us shattered, the ice sword's ultimate ice move. The ice break of the ice sword. Just looking at it makes my mouth water. You are also quite good. But if you saw your little brother's body with a hole in it, would you still be able to act like that? It would be a bit early for this child to die now. Dijal was full of worry. When did he come out? All moves have been exposed. It's not difficult to fight them alone. But Boris. Suddenly he exclaimed, 12 years is not a short period of time. He laughed and laughed. What did this kid just say? You steadfastly shouted at him, meaning I know when I need to die, and I won't die in your hands. He sounds bitter, so let's see if that's true. And then he swung the axe towards him. Even though Boris was close to death, he was not afraid at all. Dajjal helplessly shouted, "No," he said arrogantly, blaming himself for that arrogant attitude, "Kid." But unexpectedly, an arrow shot straight into his neck from nowhere. Just a few seconds later he died instantly. His subordinates panicked at the same time, the leader GFI. But not only that, countless arrows were shot one after another, destroying all of them. The scene at that time was extremely panicky. If you ran quickly you would be ambushed. This situation makes Dajjal skeptical. Without these arrows things would be very bad. Who shot them? Suddenly someone came from behind and said, "You fought well, young man." In front of him was a group of people who looked very mysterious. "Even though I'm a benefactor, I still don't let down my guard. Who are you?" he asked curiously. "We are the ones who just saved you. Can't you behave better?" Dajjal spoke up, "If you don't want to repay the favor then thank you," but all he got in response was their laughter. They calmly said, "Do you have anything to give us?" In his heart, he thought that the people who had almost killed him had all died in the hands of these people in the blink of an eye. These 4 people are very good. Are they allies or stronger enemies? Seeing him hesitate, one person stood up and said, "You seem to be the son of a rich family. Do you think they have anything for us? We just need this campfire and that's enough." Hearing that, he didn't know what else to say. "Thank you for your help, you all seem very competent." So one by one everyone introduced themselves. "I'm Kyo Kem, I'm Dugwin without a last name. I'm Ramavak Dun, everyone often calls me Reckless Ramavak. Chan Naka Gog people often call me Chan Ni or Nika." As for Dajjal's side, he hesitantly looked at Boris. "We were." Seeing that, Dun spoke up and said, "Maybe you still don't trust us. It's normal. If you feel uncomfortable, we can leave." The 2 cousins started looking at each other. He spoke up to correct, "That's not the case, please just rest here." The 2 cousins' mood also gradually improved. And then they gathered together around the campfire. Suddenly someone threw Boris an apple. He suddenly looked up. Chan Naka Gog laughed and said, "You don't eat it right away, then you're not a child. It's not poisonous, don't worry." He asked, "Is that boy your younger brother? He's still quite young to be wandering around on his own in this wasteland. We usually go around doing quests to earn money. Sometimes we will go to places to do quests if they offer a suitable price. Have you ever heard of the Land of Death?" Dajjal suddenly asked. "Dead Land, yes." He just explained that that was where Ganaply lived long before the Ghost Kingdom. That place was so prosperous that all the pillars of the houses were plated with gold and gems, filling the streets. But because of the war, there is nothing left now. Now it's just a wasteland full of evil spirits and zombies. The Land of Death is a place where you can only go back in, but not out. They continued to sit and talk to each other. Chan Naka sarcastically, "The story about my dead land was so unexpected. Looking at your face, I know you're imagining all sorts of scary things." Dajjal hesitantly replied, "To be honest, it was quite unbelievable that everyone could get out of there alive." Dajjal thought there was a reason why everyone knew about the Land of Death until now. Must be a place where you can often come and go. That's why it's called the Land of Death. Ramavak was still fondling the arrow but called everyone to watch. There was some purple liquid on it. Ramavak warned, "Be careful not to touch it, it's a deadly poison so strong it can kill a ghost." Boris and Dajjal turned pale in fear. Chan Naka stood up and walked towards Ramavak and said, "Come on, we've never been to Ganaply." But he turned to the 2 Borists and said, "We're just going around there and bringing back what the ghosts wore. Do you want to see something interesting?" Chan Naka pulled out a shining gold bracelet. Looking at every detail meticulously engraved on the bracelet, you can see that this is a valuable item. Chan Naka threw the bracelet into Borit's hand, and the boy quickly caught it. He looked closely at the bracelet and discovered that the details engraved on the bracelet were a complete painting. A painting of people dancing. This is really exquisite. Boris praised in his heart, "I had never seen the Golden City before but it felt like it was right before my eyes. The dust of sand grains sparkles in the sunlight. Vertical golden columns and floors decorated with rubies. Great, I can feel something strange." The sky began to light up, the house was lit up. The door slowly opened. The owner of the house enthusiastically greeted. "I don't even know who came so early in the morning." The Borites came in. The homeowner asked, "Everyone looked so tired." Chan Naka laughed loudly and said, "There was a bit of trouble so we couldn't camp outdoors. So we walked all night." Boris was confused as to why he went because he didn't want to sleep next to a dead body, but now a strange feeling arose in his heart. A bunch of keys were thrown at them. Chan Naka continued, "You 2 must be tired from walking all night so you should rest." Dajjal shyly thanked her. The homeowner and Kyo Kem went upstairs. He waved good night to the 2 of them. Kyo Kem stretched out tiredly and finally went to sleep. Borit rubbed his eyes, his face full of sleepiness and begged, "You're really tired, I'm about to faint. Dajjal looked at his brother gently and said, let's sleep well today and then go to sleep. No one will chase us anymore. Boris dreamed that he was back as a child when he was playing with a wooden horse in his garden. Suddenly he heard someone calling his name loudly and Boris turned his head to look. A tall man with long hair and a face that didn't look kind appeared in front of him. Boris wondered who he was. He called himself your uncle but asked in return, did you come here to play alone? Is that something fun? I want you to show me something really fun. Boris was curious. He lifted him into the air. Boris smiled from ear to ear. Look at the happy eyes of his grandson. The person claiming to be Boris's uncle gave an evil smile. You will never forget. I started to wonder what kind of expression that person would have. After saying that, he took large steps and aimed right where the deep well was approaching. Boris realized the danger awaiting him. The smile on his lips became more and more sinister. Boris struggled in despair. Let him go, he was afraid. He put him right next to the well, right at the moment he let him out. Boris suddenly woke up, discovered that he was sleeping on the ground and his hands were tied tightly behind him. The brother sitting opposite him was no different from him. Boris tried to crawl past his brother and asked him immediately, where is this place? Dajjal announced, we have to get out of here quickly. Boris panicked, the ice sword was gone, how could someone have taken it? Dajjal did not answer his brother. He laughed in agony. It's great, aren't we good at this? Dajjal confided to his younger brother that he was just a child who didn't know the world out there, but he hoped that when he was my age, he wouldn't be like that. He wouldn't feel as deceived as I did. Dajjal glared and lowered his venomous voice, I will teach you what you should have learned from your father. Let's go, we have to return what we received. Dajjal smiled evilly. Today, I will definitely pay back in full. A loud noise came from the house where the two cousins were staying. The old homeowner fell to the ground. Dajjal took steps to warn me, I don't have time to joke around. I asked again who was holding us captive. Seeing the murderous look on Dajjal's face, the landlord let out a few criticisms. From the beginning, I didn't want to get into this mess. They say you don't know how to fight, but you're not a normal child. Often. The old man scratched his head and cursed, if only those bastards hadn't taken my weakness. Dajjal bent down and picked up the sword lying on the ground. Hearing that, I couldn't help but wonder. He shouted angrily, yes Chanaka. Hearing the familiar name Dajjal was stunned. He gently asked again, did you say Chanaka? At this point, he had to tell the truth. Chanaka's gang sold you to the Lekodale mercenary army. They bought and used you as mercenaries until they could make money. The money will come looking for you soon. Dajjal is concerned about defense, but asked for news about Chanaka's gang. He also honestly declared that the Hembar would move again tonight. They usually go at night. Dajjal turned around and thought, but tell Boris, come on, we need to hurry. To the address where the landlord had told Dajjal to find a place for Boris to hide. Carefully advised, hide here and observe, understand? He had to obey his brother. Looking at Dajjal's figure walking away, Boris's face was clearly worried. Dajjal said to himself, he must punish those who deceived and betrayed him. This is because he needs to see this. I wish I could keep you as honest and good-natured as you are now, but time doesn't allow me to do that. Dajjal gently opened the door. Two familiar faces immediately met his eyes. Dajjal couldn't help but wonder why there were only Kyo-kem and Dugwin. Where were the other two? No matter who it is, hit him. He went over to get a tray from the waiter. Holding the sword in hand, he slowly walked towards the two evil men. Dajjal spoke, are you calling me? Kyo-kem was surprised. Turning to ask Dugwin, did you call it? Dugwin shook his head, didn't you say you don't drink anymore? Dajjal continued, there is a lady waiting for you outside. Drunk Kyo-kem suddenly remembered Chanaka saying he wanted to meet the merchants. Dugwin also remembered the same and arranged for the two men to meet at the village gate. Dugwin raised her head to confirm, strangely enough, that was definitely not the case. At that time, I just saw Dajjal's indignant face. The two men were immediately scared to death. Without giving them time to react, Dajjal took the tray and smashed it directly into Dugwin's body. The other hand drew the sword. He pierced the back of his hand, blood splattered. Dugwin screamed in panic, my hand. Kyo-kem stood up and picked up his sword, intending to pull it out and ask for his identity. Perhaps because he was drunk, he didn't recognize Dajjal. He quietly asked Dugwin if he was awake yet, mouthing his hand to make Dajjal pull out the sword hanging on the back of his pants. Turning to confront Kyo-kem to interrogate, I came to find where my sword was. Kyo-kem was angered by Dajjal's insolent attitude, so he rushed the sword at him, but he avoided it. Dajjal asked angrily again, but directly gave him a sword to defend him and refused to answer, that's none of your business. Dajjal struck harder. Successfully suppress opponents. I insulted you, you guys are not only petty thieves but also shameless. Say it before I cut your wrists off. Kyo-kem was scared but absolutely didn't say a word. Dajjal continued to threaten. Why didn't he say anything? He straightened his foot and kicked the table, causing it to shake. Dugwin was startled. He shouted fiercely. The pain spread to his brain, causing him to tremble and declare, Chan-na-ka was holding it. She and Ramavak were about to sell it and divide the money. Kyukem angrily cursed, Dugwin, this traitor, Chan-na-ka will not forgive this. Taking advantage of Dajjal's distraction, Kyukem successfully escaped the oppression. He ran quickly to the door, not forgetting to threaten, just wait and see when Chan-na-ka and the Black Flute gang will come to take your head. Dugwin called back, went to find Chan-na-ka and said that the cooperation was over. But I turned to Dajjal and said, I immediately knew this was going to happen and I shouldn't have participated in this dirty plan. He continued in fear. Chan-na-ka had gone to negotiate about the sword, but she was probably just acting like that and wanted to keep the sword as her own. Ramavak's main weapon is a crossbow, so he probably wants to sell his sword to split the money. Dugwin added useful information. If you go to the north gate of the village at midnight you will see the Chan-na-ka mercenary group trading with. If they see you there they will quickly take you into the hands of the mercenaries. Remember, Chan-na-ka Gog is a dangerous woman. Dajjal lowered his sword and said, I will regret this if I don't find the ice sword again. He pulled out the sword pinned in Dugwin's hand. Then chase him away, don't let me see you again. It was dark, the moonlight high above was round and round, shining down on the small village. Dajjal Dinman and Boris Dineman walking together on the street. Dajjal was silent. Boris followed behind a little cautiously. Suddenly Dajjal stopped, spoke bitterly, from now on everything will be even worse, everything will. He raised his hand holding the bloody knife and said, look at Boris. His arm was covered in dried blood. Dajjal said this was something even he couldn't do. Not only our father, but you too. Murder, he said and then dropped the knife to the ground. I don't know if it was accidental or intentional, but the knife stabbed straight down, the light shining on it made it sparkle more. Boris looked at the knife on the ground, thinking no, he's not that kind of person. Remembering before, when he stood behind the wall and accidentally learned all the truth, Boris painfully thought it was all because of him. Because I tried to protect you. Dajjal turned around and said to his younger brother, when you have someone you want to protect, you will do anything, even if it means killing someone else. Boris interrupted me, you called Dajjal, I don't care about you, you should also cherish yourself. Just like how I can do anything for you, you should also do anything for yourself. Protect and cherish yourself more than any treasure, whether it is an ice sword or something else. That way I won't die. That way I won't be abandoned. That way I won't get hurt. Only then will you not get sick. Dajjal finished speaking and went to place his hand on his brother's shoulder. He advised, stay alive. Endure this world of suffering, survive until the end, Boris. On a deserted road, there were two people covered in scarves talking enthusiastically, holding a sword at their waist. They were Ramavak Dun and Chan-na-ka Gog. They didn't pay attention to their surroundings and just talked to each other, laughing loudly at each other. Dajjal whispered that he didn't see the ice sword anywhere. He and Boris were hiding on the roof in the distance, out of sight of the other two. Dajjal whispered that Q wasn't here either, he thought he was here. Boris looked in the other direction and said over there. He pointed at the group of people holding weapons walking in front hesitantly. Dajjal was surprised, he was silent. Looking closely at them, he judged that they were definitely Lakota Shore mercenaries. He heard that they were famous warriors from the war. Daraki asked in a harsh voice if you guys wanted to trade. Chan-na-ka Gog was wearing a cloak, bowing his head and saying oh my, what an honor to meet Captain Daraki of the Golden Spear. This bald guy doesn't care about flattery, he gets straight to the point, saying you guys have to compensate us, the person you sold it to us ran away. Chan-na-ka Gog raised his head and replied, but wasn't it your fault for getting there late? It wasn't my fault they ran away, we still completed the mission as usual. Daraki gradually became frustrated, he insisted that I would get straight to the point. One thing was double compensation. Second, two people must join the army and work for us. Chan-na-ka just now was still gentle and happy when he heard that, so why did he get angry and shout loudly, what a scam, are you underestimating me? Ramavak Dun smiled and explained, don't be like that. Yes. It's true that we have to compensate you, this is not the first time we have worked with you, but how can we help the army? We'll only weaken everyone, we'll pay you back. And before he could finish speaking, Chan-na-ka shouted at those damn bastards. She threw out a bag and threw it on the ground, contemptuously yelling here's the money. Daraki looked down at his bag of money and said this can't be done. I told you to compensate for the loss. If you don't pay or work, I will kill you too. Ramavak turned to call Chan-na-ka, she angrily cursed damn it, they want double the money, wait a minute. Seeming to have thought of something interesting, she laughed loudly and said wait, Captain Daraki, I want to ask for something, you don't intend to make us work forever, right? Ramavak was a little hesitant and whispered in your ear, are you serious? Do you want to become a slave or something? Chan-na-ka replied indifferently no. She asked, We don't need to work forever, right? Diraki, who had been silent for a while, slowly replied that we will release you if we do it well. A doctor in Travachi hired 50 people, but 2 of them were killed in an accident. So we need 50 people because of the contract. Chan-na-ka smirked and replied okay. She took off her cloak, her long hair fluttering, her confident smile said I don't know what to do, but we just need to do it well, right? Chan-na-ka with formidable determined eyes. You said I could do it, don't change your mind. Suddenly from behind her, Dajjal appeared, he stood proudly on the roof, shouting loudly to stop. Diraki saw this scene and was not too surprised. Chan-na-ka on the other hand, she was extremely excited and said something, you guys haven't run away yet. Dajjal jumped down from above. He growled, saying every word clearly, give me back my sword, Chan-na-ka gog. He walked in front of her, repeating Chan-na-ka gog, give me back my sword. Boris behind him was confused and a little scared. Ramavak was confused and asked him what he was doing here. With steadfast determination in his eyes, he stared at her without saying anything. Chan-na-ka seemed satisfied with reality, she replied, the person she was looking for had appeared. So can we go now, Commander Diraki? He hasn't said anything yet. The sharp tip of the sword glows in the dark. Dajjal angrily pulled out his sword and pointed it straight at Chan-na-ka, his voice filled with resentment and asked how could she buy and sell us, slaves don't exist in this country. Chan-na-ka scoffed that if he was arrested because he was weak, then he should obediently follow along. How could a rookie dare to show off to others? If you want to cry, run home and complain to your mother. Dajjal remained silent and said nothing. He still maintained the same posture, pointing the sword at her face, when suddenly Boris shouted from behind him that she was the weak one. The boy bravely exposed himself and took advantage of us while we were sleeping, but he was talented. You guys are proud of that, all of you. Remember that before, Romanvak came to him wearing a shawl and said, you seem to be the son of a rich family going out, what do you think they will have for us? Fire. This camp is good, so be satisfied. He gave him an apple and said take it. As for Chan-na-ka, she took out a sparkling gold bracelet and asked if she wanted to see anything interesting. Borai's tears were still in his eyes, he scolded him for being such a coward. You guys took advantage of our trust, you guys are not warriors at all, just a bunch of scammers. Diraki stood on the sidelines staring at the boy. Ramavak and Chan-na-ka heard this and gritted their teeth angrily. They cursed you, you insolent boy. Diraki then spoke up and said it seemed like we had different opinions. Chan-na-ka worriedly asked, wait, what are you talking about? She was a little scared, her face was sweaty and she was about to run away, saying they had appeared, so here we go, oh that's right, all the money we had. Before he could finish his sentence, Diraki ordered to fight back. He announced, fight back and the losing side will have to sell it back to me, no matter who is straight, that person will be allowed to leave. However, whoever loses will be tied up. Dajjal and Chan-na-ka entered the battle. He took a fighting stance and told his opponent to draw his sword. Chan-na-ka confidently replied, okay, I will definitely win. Just as she was about to take out the sword, she suddenly stopped, thinking no, if I pull out this sword, Commander Diraki will definitely take it away. Thinking that, she decided to pull out the sword from her waist, warning, damn it, if I sell your body, don't blame me. Having finished speaking, Chan-na-ka immediately turned his leg back at an angle of 360 degrees. She continuously swung her sword at Dajjal, not forgetting to laugh and say that this corpse, he was surprised by the attack so he could only dodge without being able to counterattack. Dajjal thought to himself, so fast. Chan-na-ka confidently ran up and made a perfect turn. She's laughing so loudly, she's a newbie. The passive goat repeatedly took the brunt of the attack and found it difficult to resist. He constantly had to step back and was injured in the face. He could only use his sword to block his opponent's lightning-fast attacks. Boris stood outside, worriedly thinking, brother, the opponent is too strong, he is already injured, we need to win, but at this rate he will. The boy does not dare to think anymore, his arms and legs seem to be unable to stand. Suddenly Boris looked up. Seeing a silhouette of someone looming on a tree branch, he wondered who it was. A voice rang out, saying goodbye. Boris was stunned and opened his eyes wide in fear. The battle between Chan-na-ka and Dajjal seemed to be coming to an end, blood was splashing everywhere. Dajjal panted, the wound on his face continued to bleed, and he received even more injuries. Boris screamed in worry, he called his brother's name, Dajjal. It seemed as if a stream of power was transmitted into his body. Dajjal regained consciousness, his eyes filled with determination. He quickly took the opportunity to reach out his hand. Even though his hands were now weaponless, it was all or nothing. Dajjal still decided to approach Chan-na-ka to take back what belonged to him. She knew his intentions but was passive and unable to resist. She could only shout in confusion, what the hell is that? Dajjal firmly grasped the handle of the sword. Chan-na-ka awkwardly said you are. Without waiting for her, Dajjal quickly pulled the sword out of its sheath. She seemed frozen, only knowing what to scream. Before she could finish her sentence, Chan-na-ka was frozen, surrounding her with a thick layer of ice. She was frozen with a shape as unbeautiful as her life. Everyone who witnessed the terrible battle just felt extremely confused. They whispered to each other, "Dajjal, what did that boy just do? Look, it's glowing." Both Boris and Dara Ki is also nervously watching. On the field, Chan-na-ka was frozen motionless in one place. As for Dajjal, he turned towards his younger brother. He just stood there, holding the glowing sword without saying a word. Finally, Dajjal sighed with peace of mind and announced that the match was over. After freezing Chan-na-ka Gog stiffly, Dajjal Dineman coldly declared, "I win." Daraki heard that and nodded and said, "Okay, I will send you there." Boris then happily ran to hug his brother. Romanovak Dun saw Chan-na-ka Gog being defeated like that and couldn't help but get angry. How could Chan-na-ka do that? He pulled out his crossbow and gritted his teeth, thinking, damn, now everything has turned out like this. He raised his bow and arrow towards the two Dineman brothers embracing each other. The arrow now aims precisely at the prey. Romain Dun's eyes were full of veins because he was extremely angry. But before he could do anything further, 3 sharp knives came out of nowhere and stabbed him in the arm. Ramovac Dun hugged his arms in pain and screamed, causing Dajjal and Boris to startle and turn their heads to look. He fell to the ground. Captain Daraki looked confused and asked Ramovac Dun, "How dare you act in front of me?" Then the captain called Naja, who was hiding in the tree. Hearing that, Naja immediately jumped down from the tree. In her hands were 2 small sharp knives. Daraki then ordered Naja to capture that loser. The girl heard the command and immediately rushed straight towards Ramovac Dun. He looked in horror at the person rushing towards him. Ramovac Dun did not have time to react, so Naja slashed him straight in the body. His crossbow then fell to the ground. Naja looked coldly at the person in front of him. Ramovac Dun is currently having a knife held to his neck by the girl. He then looked at the 2 brothers Dajjal and Borit and raised his voice to blame Captain Daraki for abandoning us after dealing with each other so many times and siding with the bastards. That. Romain Dun even angrily questioned the captain, why, seeing those kids made his motherly instincts rise. Daraki didn't care much about what this guy said. Just tell your subordinates to clean up this mess. Then 2 of his subordinates came to arrest Ramovac Dun. This guy got angry and shouted, "Let me go." Dajjal then spoke up, "It seems like you don't value a mother very much. I don't know if you dare say that in front of your mother. If you're still alive, it's best not to meet your mother. It's no different than flies with ulcers." When Ramovac Dun heard this, his face turned pale. He angrily said, "What a bastard." Naja now looked indifferently forward. Borit looked at her eye to eye. In his heart, he thought to himself, the eyes he felt on the tree were definitely hers. At this time, team leader Daraki called Najia over. "Well done, Najia, we're done here." The girl and the mercenaries left like that. They also conveniently carried Chan-na-ka Gog, who was frozen stiff. Borit then thought to himself, looking back now, Chan-na-ka and her team never wondered why they ran away. Surely they approached me with the intention of stealing from the beginning. My horse has been run far away, my money has been stolen, what am I going to eat now? Do I have to sleep outside? I'm so worried. A series of questions keep popping up in Boris's head, but at least his brother, Dajjal, was safe, and he had his ice sword back, which was a relief. But at this moment a hand reached out to him. A stranger appeared in front of Boris. He grabbed his hand and strangled him. Boris was extremely panicked at this moment. "Wait, who is this? Am I being followed again? I can't breathe, please help me." Borit cried, sobbing for his brother's help. This stranger's eyes were filled with cruelty. Boris tried very hard to shake him off. He is currently in a dilemma. Boris then opened his eyes wide. He gasped and sat up. He touched his neck and wondered if it was just a dream. Boris looked at Dajjal lying on the other side. Dajjal didn't move at all. Boris saw this and was extremely worried about him. Why was he lying on the ground like this? He then quickly asked, "Are you okay?" Dajjal then turned over, sweat pouring down his face. Borit saw that and breathed a sigh of relief. He must have been tired and fell asleep. "I thought there was an ambush or something." Then he took a blanket and covered Dajjal's body. Then lie down next to him and wish him good night. Dajjal's body was now sweating more and more. Suddenly he opened his eyes wide. After that, Dajjal continued to breathe rapidly, as if he was experiencing severe pain. The next morning in town, the boss looked at the 2 newly arrived guests. It turned out that they were brothers Boris and Dajjal. Dajjal said to the boss, "Sorry, I want to sell some stuff." He then placed the item he wanted to sell on the table. Then asked the boss, "How much does this cost?" The owner took out a magnifying glass to examine the item and said, "Look, it's a mirror, not bad, very well preserved. However, it's quite old. I'll sell it for 300 euros. When Dajjal heard this, his expression immediately became dissatisfied. Then he said, I think that price is too low. Boris heard that and nodded in agreement with his brother. The shop owner let out a breath and said, do you think this is new? If the price is too high, it's a robbery. If you're not satisfied with this price, go somewhere else. Then he asked Dajjal, do you think you can get something higher than 200 euros? This used to be very popular, but now it's outdated. Hearing that, Boris frowned and said, brother, this is very important to me. Dajjal's eyes became quiet as if he was thinking about something, then he answered him, no. Then Dajjal said to the innkeeper, 300 euros, that's fine. When Boris heard this, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. Dajjal then smiled and asked, if you're hungry, don't eat. He said while eating that it looked quite delicious. Boris picked up the piece of bread and couldn't help but feel dissatisfied. How could he eat it? The price of 300 euros is crazy, he would never sell it even for 3,000 euros, this is a meal earned from his mother's relics. Just bread and water is fine, how long is he going to treat me like this? Thinking of this, he hesitantly asked, when will father contact us? When Dajjal received his brother's question, his expression suddenly changed. Then he pretended to calmly reply, probably for a while. He's probably just recovering from his injuries. Dad probably wants to see us when he's healthy again. Finally, Dajjal told Boris, so we must also eat and live healthily. Only then will we be ready to meet our father at any time. Despite looking so calm on the outside, Dajjal's hands were shaking constantly. Boris looked at his brother in shock. Then he turned his head the other way and said, yes, you're right. He frowned and thought, but brother, don't you want to meet your father? If that's not the case, why is his face so sad? In the dark night, the hands of a stranger appeared. He reached out to strangle Boris. He cried like that, and again, it was this dream again. The stranger's eyes were filled with cruelty. Boris then tried to open his eyes and wondered, why do I keep having this dream again, why? In front of him, the silhouette of someone appeared. It turned out that this person was his brother Dajjal. His eyes looked lifeless and empty. Dajjal then used his hand to lift Boris up. The frightened boy tried to remove the hand that was strangling him. Dajjal then threw Boris to the ground. He kept slamming himself straight into the wall. He looked at his brother and sobbed. Dajjal then turned to look at his ice sword. The ice sword emitting light was standing on the wall. Boris saw this and screamed in fear. He ran to hug his brother from behind and said in panic, are you really going to kill me? Boris was scared and begged Dajjal, I'm so scared, why did you do that, what's wrong with you, please wake up. Dajjal, with crimson eyes that were different from usual, suddenly stopped. Boris then woke up again the next morning. He was breathing heavily continuously. Dajjal appeared in front of him and asked, what's wrong, did you have a nightmare?